Good morning. We welcome everyone to the interactive session arranged by the Department of Instrumentation Engineering by Professor Jagannathan Sarangapani from Missouri University of Science and Technology for the benefit of faculty members, research scholars, and all participants from all over the country. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Professor to the audience. Dr. Jagannathan Sarangapani is an UG alumnus from the Electrical Engineering Department of CEG campus, Anna University. He passed in the year 1986 with University Gold Medal. Let us give a big hand to Professor. He did MS Embedded Systems and Robotics from University of Saskatchewan, Canada. He obtained his PhD in Intelligent and Embedded Control of Robotics from University of Texas. He served as the site director for the graduated NSF Industry University Cooperative Research Center on Intelligent Maintenance Systems. He also has a courtesy appointment with the Department of Computer Science. He has co-authored 190 peer-reviewed journal articles, over 292 refereed IEEE conference articles, several book chapters, and co-authored 4 books and 2 edited books. He holds 21 patents. He has guided 32 PhD and 31 MS students so far. His research funding is in the excess of $19.9 million from NSF, NASA, AFOSR, ARO, ONR, AFRL, Boeing, Honeywell, Sandia, and from other companies. His current research interests include learning, adaptation, and neural network control, network control systems, cyber physical systems, prognostics, big data, and autonomous systems, robotics with healthcare applications. He served and he is still serving on various editorial boards, and he has served as co-editor for the IET book series on control. It is really our honor, Professor, to welcome you to this session. I would like to inform the audience and also Professor that we have the physical audience here in KVN Seminar Hall in the Department of Instrumentation Engineering, MIT campus. We also have several participants joining on the online mode for this session. Definitely, this will be a fruitful session because we are all trying really hard to publish our papers, and it is very apt that a professor who has published several papers in very high reputed journals like IEEE Transactions is here right with us, and he is ready to give us some tips and suggestions for publications. Thank you so much, Professor. We leave the desk to you. And we have shared a small screenshot for the benefit of the audience. We request the audience to keep track of whatever is projected on the screen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. So those on online, can you hear me?
We can raise the hand. We can give a hand raise.
Okay. So I see everybody raising there. Thank you. I think that sounds good. Okay. So it's I just wanted to say a couple of words before I start. First of all, this is going to be an interactive session. I'll talk for a few minutes, but I wanted to thank the MIT campus, the Department of Instrumentation and Control Engineering for hosting me for this short visit. That was a pleasure. It was my sister campus to my original campus where I graduated. So with that, I wanted to say, the topic today was how to write a good journal paper. And I know this is always the difficult topic. This topic goes hand to hand with the topic of how to do research. Because if you don't do quality research, you can't write quality journal paper. So they are connected together. So I thought I would just mention that fact, okay? So let's say you have done the quality research now, and once you have done the quality research, then you probably want to write a paper. And so the first thing you want to look at it is, what is the type of journal you want to send? There are a lot of different journals, right? And there are a lot of different journals. And one of the journals that most of us who are in engineering field, very popular is IEEE transactions. So especially if I am the one, my papers typically target transactions. And each society, if you look at it, even if it's a computer science, they have IEEE transactions. So I have published recently blockchain security, okay? And that went to IEEE transactions on mobile computing or ACM transactions and so forth. So the transactions are probably the top that we look at it, and everything kind of comes down in terms of impact. So the impact factor is one of the most important, and it's connected with what we call citations. So citations means if you publish a paper, how many of people are using your work? So that is very important. So all that is connected finally to how do you write a good journal paper, okay? Now, as I said, the first step is you need to know how to do research. Okay, let's assume you have done good research, okay, and now you are ready to write a journal paper, okay? So with that, let's look at the board here, what I kind of shared here. The most important part when you talk about a journal is what we call novelty. So novelty means something that you have created that does not exist before, okay? So a lot of times we also call that as contributions. So contribution means what did you add to the literature or to the field that did not exist before, okay? So that's the very critical part, and typically a lot of times people think it's applied. It's not applied. It's fundamental science. It's a theory. And a lot of times we talk about significant contributions. Why is significant? Because a lot of times my own students would do a little bit, I change a few things with already what is available, and it becomes more like incremental. We use the word incremental. Okay, there's a huge difference between incremental and significant. So if it's incremental, the papers go down to tier 2 journals. Okay, so there are different tiers. Okay, like if you're from Anna University, that's kind of a tier 1, Chennai, IIT. So, you will see that as you go down. So that's what also in journals, it's based on impact factors. Okay, so I think it's basically what is important is the significant contribution is what plays a role. So you got to have that before you start writing a paper. All right. So when I say theory, means you have to come up with a new method. It has to be a new method that does not exist before. Okay. So typically, if you have come up with a new method and you have a hardware result, you could definitely apply a patent. That's a big deal. You can write a patent. Now, a lot of times, journal papers may not result in patents because patents may cost you more. You have to file a patent. Sometimes in US, it may cost between $10,000 to $15,000. You have to find a lawyer. You have to do that. So a lot of times we stop at the sake of publications. You see, and so that's important. But what is that means? New method, a new algorithm, something that is fundamentally new that does not exist. Okay, so that's a very critical part. Now, once you have that, now how do we know it's new? How do we know it's a new algorithm? Usually, your advisor should tell you, or you should see that it should have a significant improvement from your outcome. So let's say you are working on a healthcare application, and you're coming up with a method that detects tumor or that detects diabetes, some problem, and you say that it may detect early on. Now, suppose your method would come up and say, what is even the potential? Like this person might have in 5 years or in 10 years, this person would have very high probability would have will have diabetes. So imagine that sort of a thing that people are looking at. It's not that how do you mitigate that and how do you live with it. Those days are gone now. So the same thing, when people are looking at COVID, most of you probably have seen, the idea was, it caught us in a surprise. A lot of people died because of COVID. So the question now people are looking at it is, how do we prevent such a disaster in the future? Not just COVID, but any other disease, communal disease. When I say communal, you saw how it spreads out from one country to the other, from one region to the other. So the idea is that type of work is novel. So it's not like you take somebody's vaccine and you make some changes to it, and then you're producing another vaccine. It may not be as effective as something you have come out new. Okay, so that sort of result, what we call significant contribution. Now, if you don't have significant contribution, you may not be able to write a good quality journal paper. So quality versus quantity, there's a huge difference. So a lot of times when you look at people, we look at IEEE transactions. So when we're recruiting to a faculty, or when most of the companies recruiting PhDs in labs, they look at how many people are writing transaction papers. And typically there's impact factor. And the impact factor varies every year. Typically they average it out over 5 years. Okay, the impact factor, the journal comes up, and that impact factor can vary like 20. Nature, I don't know how many of you heard Nature. Nature has there are a lot of Nature papers, but the original Nature has over 20, impact factor of over 20. Okay, the ones I publish varies between 16 to 10. Okay, anywhere between 16 and 10. The Springer, the other journals are somewhere like 1.2 and 2 and so forth. So you can see the variation in impact factor. And if you have one paper in a high impact factor, that's a big deal. Okay, so that's important. So keep this in mind. If you're a research scholar, you should aim at least 2 or 3. Okay, and so with that, let's go into the paper. So when you write a paper, you got to have those results with you. All right, you got to have those results with you. Then you say, okay, I'm going to write the paper. Okay, so in the paper, you have to have a title. So the title comes after. So when we write the paper, we go backwards. Remember that. We always go backwards. A lot of times people come from the top. We always go backwards. Now, why is that we always want to go backwards? Now, because the impact is on the conclusions, not in the intro. So the impact is on the conclusions. So somebody reading your conclusions should tell, wow, what is the benefit that I'm getting? So there's a difference. A lot of times my own students make this mistake. There's a mistake of conclusion versus summary. There's a huge difference. Okay, what is the difference between conclusion and a summary? What's the difference? So conclusion is something that you draw from what you have done. Okay, and that's not easy. That's where I think you are really showing everybody you have understood that area, understood the material, and therefore you're drawing that conclusion. Okay, summary is basically kind of what you did as part of the work. So summary has no impact. So your abstract is more like a summary. That's why I said it has to go backwards. So you have to know from the conclusion, one, you draw a conclusion about your method. What did the method, shed the light about? So I think that's important. Theoretically, what issues has it overcome? Remember that. Theoretically, what issues have they overcome? So for example, lab on a chip. There are a lot of tests that healthcare we do. Many times they'll ask you to go to the hospital and MRI and a lot of these, and you have to schedule way in advance. It's so expensive. And you know what you're going to do? You basically have to prepare for those tests. But imagine the same test can be done in 5 to 10 minutes, like a truck or a car. You just line up. Let's take in COVID, what happened? They take a snap, right? And immediately they'll give you a test, which is 99.99%. So imagine That has much more impact than something that you need to wait for 6 months or schedule. So what I mean is the type of method that you developed comes out as one of those conclusions. Okay, so the theoretical conclusions. Now what else in the theory conclusions? Can you show that it works all different conditions? So a lot of times when we do research, we do some assumptions. We say that I'm going to assume this particular drug or this particular method is valid for India. Okay. Now, if you try that method to some other place, some other country, it may not be effective, or within locally, regionally. So what I mean is those are limited. So those are your conclusions from your theory paper, from the theory part of it. So the conclusion part is very, very critical. Remember that. So you want to say how much is the improvement? Can it be applied to a variety of scenarios? Not only that, you also want to say if that method is generalized, let's say you're coming up with a method for diabetes, for instance, detecting or diagnosing diabetes. Can you use the method for some other problem in the healthcare? A lot of times I don't see that. Many times we do that, a method you develop, let's say deep learning based image analysis method. That image analysis method, I could use it even for x-rays. Potentially I could use for MRI images, thermal images, underwater images, a regular RGB camera, hyperspectral images. So you can even talk about so many different varieties of camera. And there are a lot different night vision cameras, which they can only see nicely in the night vision, but not in the daytime. So even the same analysis of image-based, detection and all that prediction, you could even talk about different types of cameras or sensing mechanism. So what I mean is, those kind of conclusions you could even think about in your mind when you're drafting it. And finally, in the conclusion, you talk about the future work. So what you aim at, that's something you got to have in your mind before you start doing the paper. So once you have it, then you can say, okay, the abstract is basically stating, it's like it has to have a punch, because a lot of times people read your abstract and people read your conclusions. A lot of people, a lot of reviewers don't even look at your results and so they look at your abstract and conclusion. So if your abstract is boring, nobody reads your intro and stuff. So what should you have? You should have a punch. Remember that. So somebody who's sitting reading this should say, man, how come I have not thought about this idea? So somebody reading that abstract, that should be what they should have. It shouldn't be the case where somebody reading it, man, it's just so horrible. It's some other paper that I've read. So that type of feeling you shouldn't have. So when somebody reads an abstract, really nice abstract, remember that. And then you will say, okay, let me see what else he's done. So immediately he's going to go to the conclusion. In the conclusion, he's going to read and say, wow, it's like 20% improvement, 10% improvement. So if you say some of those, that shows the work has a significant impact, right? If you show 2% improvement, 1% improvement, it makes no difference. It makes no difference. No reviewer is going to look at probably the other parts of your paper. Remember that. So in a journal, okay, as a senior editor, there are two parts. I don't know how many of you have seen this. There are two parts. The one part, you don't see it. As an editor, we see it from the reviewer. The other part, you guys see it. That's called comments to the authors. Okay? So the comments to the authors are the ones that you see it. Typically, a lot of times, in the comments to the authors, not everything is disclosed. Why? Because, let's say if I'm a reviewer, I don't want to hurt your feelings. So I won't say that this work is marginal. Marginal means just reject. Okay? So there are times that people write, when they write it, they usually don't disclose it to the authors because it might look like, they don't want to hurt the people who are writing those papers. But those comments essentially were technical comments. So in the comments to the authors, they talk about what they understood about your work, and then they give you some specific comments, right? And that comes back as, but what is the most cream stays with the editor. They write and tell you clearly this work has no use. That's incremental. These are the words that comes out, the reviewers to the associate editor. So there is an associate editors. Under the associate editors, we have senior editors like myself. Then you have editor-in-chief. We also do that. So these are the three layers of editorials that people do. Okay. So remember that abstract should have a punch. When you're writing an abstract, don't write half a page of abstract. Usually it's about 10 to 15 lines. So it's like one paragraph. Now remember, it's an abstract. It's not a basically intro or a summary. So you have to condense it significantly about what you're writing, okay? So it's only one paragraph. Now even, let me give you, it's not something that all Nobel laureates, everybody, if you look at in physics, chemistry, the papers are even shorter than engineering. You'll be surprised. Those papers are like 4 pages, 2 pages, 6 pages. So it's not like 10 pages that some of the engineering folks write. So imagine you have to write a paper in 2 pages. You got to really think about what you're writing, right? A lot of times we make it like 10 pages, But anyway, so abstract has to have a punch. So what I would say to my students is, if somebody is reading that abstract, you should be jumping up and down and say, how come I never thought about this idea? That should be the thought that you should have as a reviewer. That's very crucial. So once you do the abstract, you know the conclusion, then the intro, what I wrote here, the background, the methodology, the results and discussion, those sections are much easier to develop. Okay, you still have to put some effort, but it's a lot easier because the hard part is in the abstract and in the conclusion. Okay, so now coming back to the intro basically is the face of your paper. So somebody is reading your paper, they basically immediately has to imagine yourself, the authors, how expert they are. So when you're reading it, in the intro, basically that person you are talking about most recent work. Unless there is a paper that you cite 20 years ago. Sometimes we do cite 20 years ago paper. But typically we cite the last 5 years, okay? But you can actually bring out that sort of thing, the last 20 years, but very quickly you're going to come. Then you talk about some of the gaps in research. So that goes in the intro. So the gaps that you're going to talk about cannot be wishy-washy. Have you heard the word wishy-washy? Okay, wishy-washy means like it's not concrete. Okay, so somebody reading that, now remember, the papers people are reviewing, those are experts. Typically when I send it out, those are top-notch people. Okay, they don't have time. So I tell them, can you do this review? I need this very quickly. So what happens is, sometimes, they look at the abstract, that's what they do. They look at the conclusion and immediately they'll make a decision. So it can be wishy-washy. That means that you don't want to write intro 3 pages. The intro has to be a worst case, a page or page and a half. And that should lay out nicely the problem that you're dealing with. How is the problem related to what has been done before? And it also talks about what are the research gaps that you found from the reading those papers, even the most recent ones. And when you're doing that, you got to cite papers. So a lot of times I see people doing like in these papers and there won't be any citation. Okay, in these papers, there's no citation. Now that's a huge mistake. That is a huge mistake, because when you say in those papers, that's how they write in English. But in those papers, what papers are you talking about? You see what I'm saying? The same thing, like somebody says that in the past literature, and there won't be any reference to the past literature. But tell me, what past literature are you talking about? So there should be a specific or a group of citations. And some journals, they don't like, let's say you put a citation 2 to 10, from the paper 2 to 10. A lot of journals don't like that. And then after that, you won't see something like that. So what I suggest is go through each paper that you think is important and relevant to your work, and you want to write one line, the strength of the paper with respect to your work, and the gap, why that work did not fulfill what you have done. And a lot of times we don't see that part. Because a lot of authors, you know what they do? They say in the past literature, this was not done. But past literature could be last 100 years or last 20 years. So such things are very badly written paper. Usually we don't do that. Okay, so the gaps has to be strong and clear in your mind. If you don't have it, your paper has a very low chance even to go through a major revision. I'm talking about even a major revision. So then you basically come up, once you talk about it, then you say you're setting a stage now for your work as part of your introduction. So all this is basically everybody else's work. So the first paragraph is, why is this problem important? Now remember, you haven't even started your title. The title comes at the end. You don't put the title now. The title comes at the end. So initially, you basically talking about the area or why is the problem so important for you to solve. And then you talk about the literature, who did what, and why is it important, right? Then you are setting the stage for your work. So by that time, a reviewer would know, yeah, certainly there's a gap. I can see it now. And when you're citing papers, don't cite junk journals. I've seen people citing some odd conferences. Okay, I'm telling you one specific thing. I would not cite a lot of Chinese journals. I'm sorry to tell you that. And don't do that. I've seen tons and tons of Indians, citing. Don't do that. Cite UK, US, because you know why? They take one of our ideas, they write 100 papers in China. Never cite Chinese unless it's published in an IEEE ACM transactions. So don't do that. I know it's close. I've seen a lot of people doing it. Don't do that. Okay? And so remember this, because I have taught people plagiarism. Have you heard of the word plagiarism? Okay, I'm happy for you, because that's a big deal in the US. If I see a paragraph, when people submit it as an editor, I can get it. How much is the similarity with your own paper as well as with the papers published in the literature? If it's a top-notch journal, it can be more than 10 to 15% with your own paper. That's called self-plagiarism. Regular plagiarism means it's related to other papers. Now remember, references are not included as part of the thing. Only we look at from the abstract, introduction, everything. That's how the plagiarism software works. A lot of times the editors have much better control of the plagiarism. So if it's more than 10%, 10 to 15%, lot of quality journals don't accept your paper. Okay? So remember, so once you think all this, now you're coming and saying, okay, now you have setting the stage for your work. Then you talk about one paragraph. What is about your work? So you can say in this paper, therefore, in this paper, we have developed a novel method in addressing this particular problem. And then you can say in contrast with, in comparison with, you can say that, our work relaxes these assumptions, overcomes these problems. So you can actually talk about like that. We are contrasting the work that you are citing before. Okay. And then you talk about what are the challenges you faced as part of the work. A lot of times people don't do that. So somebody would say this is a difficult problem, but they don't tell you why is it difficult and why was it a challenge. And the other times people don't even say how you overcome the challenge. People say it's a very difficult problem. I've seen people using that. If it's very difficult, then how are you able to solve it? That sort of a thing people are going to ask you. So you got to have that stuff in that one or 1.5 paragraphs. Then the last paragraph, you cannot forget, is the contributions, the main contributions of this paper. Then you list, and when you're listing those contributions, you're only talking about theoretical contributions, guys. I know a lot of people don't like it, me saying this. I don't really care about hardware implementation. Hardware implementation in engineering works if you have done properly the theory. Even in healthcare aspects also would work as long as your assumptions are correct, you're doing it. So the theoretical contributions are significant. That has to come. Then only you can talk about and say, okay, now I've tried this on these data sets and I've verified. So you can have that, but a lot of times simulation or hardware verification is not considered a significant contribution. Remember that. I know it's not good to say, but let me be blunt. That's not a significant contribution. So typically it's the theory that you are coming up with. It's the novel method you designed. That is the cream of the crop. That's your cream. You see? And that cream floats on the top of that. And that's what basically we are looking at. Okay? So now, once you have set it, once you that paragraph with all the contributions, then you have to have a nomenclature. A lot of times nomenclature means sometimes people put a table, a list of variables that you put, or you're defining in your mathematical variables. You can do that. Some journals have space, we ignore that, but typically if there's space given, you can actually say, and many times we define the notations that you're using in your paper, and those things will come as part of the background. And if you want to talk to somebody about some background need, like mathematical background, or if you're working with some chemistry, or if your work involves some doing some analysis, some specific analysis, so you want to give some background, that's the background part of it. Then you get into the methodology. So the methodology basically talks about your particular work that you have come up with. And in that one, you need to give a flow. There should be a flow in your paper. So when somebody reads your intro, sometimes people add a one paragraph and say section 1 discusses this, section 2 presents this, and section 3 explains this, and section 4 details. So you don't use the same word. So there are a lot of different words. You can have a dictionary and you can use some of those words, and then you basically present, and you kind of giving them a flow of your paper. Okay, so then you go into the methodology. The methodology, essentially, you got to have one paragraph overview. Like in the methodology, how you are able to achieve your results. So you have one paragraph, you say, first we are going to do this, next we are going to do this, and third we will be doing this, and so forth. And then you start putting subsections, like each subsection dealing with one part of your work that you are doing, right? So there will be mathematics. Depending on your work, there will be a lot of tables. It all depends. But if it's an engineering work, there will be some math equations. And those math equations are your derivations. So you may have some theorems, propositions, lemmas, and those are mathematically you are proving your method works no matter what happens. So if I see that, that's all I read. I don't even look at simulation results. Because if your math is correct, and if your assumptions are correct, your work will have value. It will work no matter, even in hardware. We have done it. So I think that's the most important. Now, a lot of times if you're applying somebody else's method, imagine, then what is novel? And that's where the problem comes. So a lot of people have seen they're applying the standard deep learning method. So then somebody would wonder, yeah, you applied this, maybe nobody is doing it, and you say in the simulation I got 5% improvement. But now you know what? Somebody is going to ask you, tell me, where did you get the improvement? How you got the improvement? Then how are you going to explain? How are you going to explain? You see? So that's what the problem is. A lot of times papers get rejected because of the reason, okay? And the last part in the methodology, you prove all that, then you show some results. Now remember, I already told you, you don't put every result in a paper, right? You have all the results. So even a Nobel laureate, you got to think about what results that are important, is more effective, that you want to use. So typically few plots, and when you're doing it, you got to have a good example. Typically we take a benchmarking example. Like, and you use that example, you try your method, and then you basically show your results. And many times you overplot. Don't put single plots and all. And remember, the quality of plots have to be good. I've seen some really bad plots. It's very hard to read. And sometimes when you're plotting 3 or 4 plots, many of them are very close. And you have to make sure the font size is good, the X label, Y label. So it has to be in a good shape. And I don't know how many of you use LaTeX. How many of you use LaTeX here? Have you heard of LaTeX? Yeah. So I think LaTeX generates good quality, documents compared to Word, Microsoft Word. So if you are in engineering, usually LaTeX, so LaTeX is good. It takes a little time in LaTeX, but LaTeX generates a lot of nice, so LaTeX is good. So you put some plots that supports your theory. So the purpose of results is basically to support your theory. Now you got to have discussion. Now that's where a lot of times people don't do any discussion. A lot of times, what I've seen, people writing figure 1 shows this, and that's it. You won't see anything else more than that. But that's not a good paper. So you have to explain why that figure 1, you got that result, and you need to tie it with your method. And that's where a lot of people fail to do that. So why is it happening with your method over somebody else's approach? And that's very important, right? And discussion is very, very important. A lot of times don't do discussion. And as part of the discussion, you also want to contrast it. You can say, I compared this method with one of your literature, that the more recent one, you are comparing it, you say, I compared it, my method with this method, and here is the plot, and I can show clearly that my method is 10 times more better, 5 times better, and I'm also relaxing all those assumptions that other person has done it. So all that goes as part of the results and discussion. So remember, that comes after you do the abstract and conclusion. Then once you have done it, then you go back to the title. Then you find a catchy title that best describes your paper. The title should give somebody indication what was the general area, what was done about in the work. So that title comes at the end, and then typically they ask you 4 or 5 keywords. Once you have done it, then you say, okay, what are the keywords that are important? And typically we pick a keyword, one from the intro, one from the background, one from the methodology, 1 or 2 from the methodology, and that's how we basically come out with those keywords. Because the first keyword typically is a broader, and then as you move on to the other keywords, it's basically getting more focused. And if you don't pick the right keyword, sometimes, in nowadays, we get a lot of papers, and so a lot of times they get rejected. We call desktop rejection. I don't know how many of you heard. Desktop rejection means we normally don't send it to the reviewers. It gets rejected then and there. I reject, the transactions that I'm involved. That's number 1 in neural networks and learning, right? AI stuff. And that journal, we are rejecting pretty much 80% of the papers, 80%. Yeah. So that's the quality. Even my own papers get rejected. So it's not that I'm telling you, my own papers get rejected if I'm not careful about it. So you got to be careful with that. So what I just mentioned. And now remember, the last one is references. Now this is something also you need to be important. The references, the part of the references that is important is because a lot of times, as remember I told you, you put a lot of references, right? And this is one part I wanted to say a couple of, I want to take a couple of minutes because you don't cite references first of your own papers. You cite only one paper of yours. I've seen people citing 10, 15 papers. That's self-citations, don't do that. Okay. Number two, you also cite, if you are looking at 4 or 5 authors, you need to really cite the paper that's more recent and more relevant. I've seen people citing 4 or 5 papers. Number three, it's your job to find out who did what as part of the introduction. I've seen also in references, people citing, somebody else as if somebody else done the work. They are not citing the people who really has done the work. So what does it tell you? That means you have not really did your homework. And imagine if you have done some work, somebody else gives the credit to somebody else. Imagine that. You don't feel good, right? So this is the other part. In references, when you are selecting references, you got to pick the right references, and typically you want to pick some good quality journals. And remember, you don't cite multiple papers of the same author unless you know that has different dimension to the work that you have done. Okay, so that's very important. Now, why is references are more important? Why references are more important? Can somebody tell me why? It does, but that's not the reason. Why? You're getting close. You're getting close.
Should be relevant to the basic scientific class.
Right. So any other guesses? Why references? Why references? All of us as an editor, we use the references. Why? Where we use? So that references are the one peoples that we send the paper for reviewing. So if you cite a big guy's name, it goes to those people for reference, for reviewers. Yeah. So if you put some junk people, it won't go to those people. So if you put some good papers listed as part of the references, like as I said, IEEE transactions, then immediately that we will say, yeah, and that's number one. Number two, it also tells you whether that paper is relevant to that journal within the scope of the journal. So let's say that you are citing 10 papers from the journal, okay? So it kind of gives you that there are people who are publishing in the journal. It's relevant to the journal scope. This is the other reason we do that. So the references are extremely important. Most likely the AIs, the associate AEs, the associate editors, they look at your back of it and then they start assigning those papers. They don't assign, if you're an Indian author, we normally don't assign to the Indian reviewers. We assign it to one from China, two from US, one from UK. So it may be done globally. And typically we look at those, and so we distribute it geographically in top journals. So that references kind of tell you what sort of papers you are referring to. It also will tell you how good is your quality of your work. So that's why I told you earlier, don't cite some junk references. Don't do that. So low impact journals, if you are citing, probably it won't be useful. That's the main reason. Of course, it also authenticates, because if you have top people you cited, and then they may look at your intro and say, how your work is different, you see. But most important is the reviewers, they select. Number two is they also look at, the quality of your work. based on who you are citing, who you are following. So if you are not doing it, that shows that you are not following the right people. Okay? And the last is the appendix. You can have an appendix in most papers. Sometimes appendix is, if you have a mathematical proofs, we move those mathematical proofs as part of the appendix. The main reason is so that it flows very nicely. A lot of people don't want to read the mathematics details. They read all the method and everything. So some people may want to look at your mathematics and find novelty. So if you are doing in engineering, pretty much most papers look at mathematical novelty, and that's the reason it then gives you the method, what is novel in the method, okay? So that's what in writing a good paper, typically a paper varies about, I would say 8 to 10 pages. I have written papers published in Transactions, 18, 20 pages, but sometimes nowadays they are not letting it. If you go about 10 pages or so, each page costs you $225. So I would leave it like between 8 and 10. So now you see why it's so hard to write a paper between 8 and 10 pages. Okay? So you can acknowledge all your funding agencies. Don't forget authors. The last thing. How do you select who goes first in a paper? How do you decide who goes first? I know in India it's not done correctly. I can tell you. I know some of the people have told me my advisor's name has to be go first. No. Whose name goes first? Huh? Who contributed exactly? Who gave you the idea and who contributed? His name. In US, we are very nice. If he's a student author, the faculty member contributes 100% of the time. We put the student author the first name, always. Okay? We always do that out of respect so that, but the other question is kind of a tangential question. People ask me this. I thought maybe it's not related to how to write a paper. So this question always comes in is, a student asks me, when do I know I'm done with with my PhD? I don't know if anybody who is a PhD scholar, have you thought about it? How do you know you are done with your PhD? So somebody asked me, I asked my advisor when I was a student, the answer, that's a very straightforward, correct answer, is when the student start teaching the advisor. Understand that? When the student start teaching the advisor. And this is why we put the student's name as the first author. Even though initially the advisor might give you the ideas and the student does all the work, right? All the groundwork and everything, but the novelty initially comes from the advisor. But eventually, at the end of that PhD dissertation, the student will become the expert. Remember that. And then we know that he knows how to write. So those times the papers will get accepted because, initially it takes time because, there'll be major revision and all that coming in. By the time the student writes third, fourth paper, he understood all this game and then he can publish the paper. Okay. So I'm going to stop here and I will let the session open to questions. Okay. So let's make it interactive. So let me ask you questions. Anybody has questions? Don't feel shy. Could be as dumb as a question, but that's mostly difficult to answer.
Papers which are communicated for the conferences, whether they can be communicated to journal, what extra work is there?
Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is a great question. I think the question was.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah. That's what I'm doing. So the question was, a lot of times we write a conference paper and then the problem would happen is you may do a little extension and you submit to a journal, then the journal gets rejected. And then you realize, so yeah, what sort of contributions you should have. Now remember, a conference paper is more like an early work. It's the early work, that means you have done something. It's not concrete, but you have an idea. You did some work and you show some promise. That's a conference paper. A journal paper should have a significant, remember I use the word significant, so it has to have a significant contribution beyond the conference paper. So a lot of times that's where a lot of students struggle, because you don't have much work after you have done the conference. Then you struggle. So I would not go beyond 6 pages in a conference. Okay? So make sure your work in a conference is pretty much limited and it's early work. So you tried something, you show some promise, you can submit it as a conference paper. And your contributions are not significant compared to your journal paper. So, but when you're submitting a journal paper, remember, I told you, you cite your conference paper. You don't have to cite in print, or you don't cite in submitted. Don't do that. If your paper is published, you cite it. Otherwise, if the reviewer catches it, you'll get a rejection. And don't make sure there are software packages right now which compares plagiarism. You know that you can do that now. IEEE. IEEE gives you free. You can create an account in IEEE. If you're a member of IEEE, you can create an account and you can check your conference and journal version. Okay? Okay, I think if you can use the, not the chat, I think, right? You can actually, yeah, you can turn on the mic and ask.
Hi, Professor.
Yeah. So go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, you need to talk loudly.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Manuel. I'm a researcher from the US. Actually, Sabita ma'am actually gave me opportunity to listen to your conversation. So I have a couple of questions. So first thing is I'm working currently on a paper related to large language models and fuzzy systems. So how do I choose the right a journal? Like, do I target IEEE transactions on neural networks and learning systems, which is very famous for large language models, or do I target transactions on fuzzy systems?
Okay.
Like, I have both the topics.
Emmanuel, I can't hear you the first part. So you said.
Okay, so I'm working on a paper which works on large language models and fuzzy systems.
Large scale models. Is that what I understand?
LLM, large language models. That's generative AI.
Large language LLM. Right. Got it. Okay,
systems.
got it. Okay.
So do I target journals on neural networks IEEE transaction, or do I target IEEE transactions on fuzzy systems? Which journal do I target?
Okay. So then, okay, that's a great question. So the question was, he's working on large language models. This could be any other application, but he's working on large language models. And his question was, which journal do I target? There are a lot of variety of journals. And the journals could be learning systems, neural networks, fuzzy. So the answer to that is, what method did you develop as part of the LLM?
No, I mean I'm using LLMs but optimizing it with fuzzy systems.
Okay.
So
then the answer is fuzzy.
Okay, then fuzzy.
IEEE transaction fuzzy systems. So the way you decide is, you decide where the contribution is going to be.
Okay.
Right? So let's say you are making LLM models, but the contribution is going to be because of fuzzy systems.
Okay.
Then you are targeting the fuzzy because that's where your contribution is going to be.
Okay.
See?
Okay.
Now, sometimes you can target the application area. Yeah. Like there are some journals where, you can still do LLM, but fuzzy. But, sometimes that's what you need to look at it. Where is the impact? Where is the contribution?
Got it. Okay. Got it. I have 2 more questions. Can I ask? Yeah. So how do you see citing or publishing papers in preprint servers like Arxiv from Cornell? What is your...
Right. I think you can cite. Those are archived papers. A lot of times people, they want to show their work. And so in Cornell and other universities, they have a database where you can upload your paper so that people know that you have uploaded. That's mainly because it's so fast now. People are publishing so many papers. So that's why, and there's nothing wrong. You could, so this way you are telling people that you are submitted, you can cite those papers, no problem.
Okay.
And
And one more
the only
question.
thing is, when you are citing those papers, make sure those papers are written by top-notch authors.
Okay, got it. Yeah, one more question. Do you see like publishing failed research if I'm trying a novel approach, but then it gave me subpar results than what is existing? Is it good to publish those so that no researcher tries it?
Yeah, certainly. I think, remember, that's a very good question of all the questions. So it is not always you coming up with a new method. Remember that. You know what I have done, what he told me. There are like in a good example is deep learning. We have been nailing down the stochastic gradient descent. Pretty much every Tom and Dick and Harry uses that. So we have shown some of those methods are not as good as the ones that we develop. So it is not always, a lot of people think that, oh, it's not good to publish or criticize. That's not true. I think that's you can always do. So you could also publish a work stating that, well, I tried this method. This method works in this environment, but this method did not. Now, remember, when you write the paper, don't criticize. Okay, don't say that, oh, these authors are crap. I think don't do like that. You say that nicely. You say we wrote this paper. We basically we wanted to make sure that we compared our work, or we basically tested this work under these conditions. We felt that this work or this method hasn't produced satisfactory results. In comparison, we basically came up with this method, and this method did a better job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like disproving their theory.
Right. So
Okay.
so basically, you are not. Remember, we build on somebody else's work.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
So what I'm saying is, don't kind of put somebody down. That's the goal. Don't put
Yeah.
somebody down just because you have a better method.
Yeah, got it.
And when you do that, not all reviewers may like it. And sometimes you may have a reviewer who may get upset, and it's a headache for the editor, because they may reject it, and it becomes a headache to the editor. So I would be polished when you write it.
Got it. And one last question before I leave. Is it okay to share our papers with our peer researchers to review it before we submit it to the journals, or is it like not
I
safe?
think I would be careful. I would be
Yeah.
careful.
Okay. Thank you.
The reason is I have seen both ways. Sharing can be a danger. Sharing could be, so you really need to trust your peer.
Yeah.
Because why I'm saying, I've heard some horror stories. People reviewing the papers, and and kind of knowing some weaknesses and kind of publishing. So I heard both ways. So if you have an advisor, I think there's nothing wrong. If somebody is publishing so many papers, he doesn't care about an extra paper. But when you share, you have to be careful. I would be careful.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Let's pass it to people here. How about one person here? From here, and then we switch back and forth. Yeah, please.
There are some few components available in literature. I'm trying to implement it to a new application. Will it be called as a contribution?
Yeah, I think it is not a significant contribution. It is considered as a contribution, but not a significant. So now there are separate journals for them. So even in IEEE, there are journals. Okay, so I think those work might go to applied journals, because you are taking a method and you are trying to apply it to a different problem. So it is still a contribution, because maybe nobody might have tried that. Let's say I gave you an example. Somebody did diabetes type 2 or type 1, for example. Then you can apply the same method in type 2 as well. So you can say, by the way, I've done it in type 2, and yeah. Now, where it becomes a significant contribution is you found that when you're applying that method, it did not work. Then you modified the method, and then that becomes a significant contribution. You see? Okay. So somebody in online, any questions?
Sir, good morning, sir.
Yeah. Can you tell your name and where you are from?
Sure, sir. I'm Ganga from Chennai. I'm doing my research work, sir, from Anna University. My supervisor is from Madurai, sir.
No, but which campus?
So from Anna University, Gilli, sir. Research Center, Center for Research.
So this is the main campus, CEG?
Yes, sir. CEG,
Okay,
sir.
okay, all right.
But my supervisor is from Madurai, sir.
Madurai?
Yes, sir.
Okay, your supervisor from Madurai, what, Tyagaraja College?
No, sir. KLM Engineering College. KLM.
Okay, KLM. Okay, so you may want to say your name and the college where you're from. Okay, go ahead. What's your
Yes,
question?
sir. I'm really happy and very happy to interact with you. I got a very golden opportunity, I can say, sir. So thank you so much, sir. So the first thing is I want to introduce that I have a kid and right now as a family I'm doing my doctorate. It has become 5 to 6 years, sir. I've submitted my thesis actually. I'm waiting for in my journal paper volume and issue number is not assigned, so I'm waiting it to be to the next level. That is scrutinizer of the examiners. It has been hold on, sir.
Okay.
So the lots of issues has become 5. There is 6 years from my enrollment. The thing
Okay.
is that I'm at home and I'm fluctuating. Lots of works is there, and still I'm continuing my research work. But the thing is now at this point, I'm right now lots of naysayers. They're saying, what is the point of doing this research? Or so much hard work I've done. I've published one journal paper, but still lots of hardships are there. So one thing, just I want to motivate like us as women at home, whether we can do or publish papers, balancing both family and journal papers. Is it
Right,
very tough?
balancing. Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it very
That's
tough, sir?
Yeah, yeah. I think this I in fact I met so many research scholars. Let me say, no, that's an excellent question, Ganga.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for bringing it up. I know, I think that's an excellent question. In fact, I even talked to those, some of them I met during my physical visit, because those who have, family, and it's not easy. It's not easy, right? And as you said, it's not easy. But let me say this to you. It's still important for you to write journal papers. That's the outcome of your research work. Okay? So let me say this, number one. Now, you don't have to write 5, 6 journal papers, given that you have other commitments. So what I suggest to those people is you write 2 or 3 solid quality journal papers. Now, why is that? Because you do want to take the credit. Remember, Ganga,
Okay.
you work hard so you need to get the name of the work that you have done.
Okay.
So it makes, it's really silly after working all this hardship. It's like cooking. Let's say you put all this effort cooking and nobody eats the food. How do you feel that?
So really it's disheartening, yes.
Yeah, so that's exactly. So you spent, like you said, you spent 5, 6 years working all that hardship. I think you want to have those papers. Now, that's why my advice is typically for others, don't wait to write the papers till the last minute. As you are navigating with your PhD, you should be developing your papers and submitting it. So this is to avoid this kind of situation, So, but my suggestion to you is, it's not the number that is important. It's basically the quality that you publish. If you have written 1 or 2 journal papers, I think that's good enough.
Yes,
And that balances your your other commitments. And why is this important? Now remember, you started this journey as a PhD student. If you were not, then I would tell you, okay, stop it. There's no reason for you. But since you have already gone through it, you need to get the last credit, because if you don't publish it, nobody would know that.
yes.
And like you said, for the same reason, you will become a role model to people, others. That's why I asked you your name and where you are from,
Yes.
because you will become a role model to a lot of people who come behind you.
Thank you so much, sir. Because as you said, sir, because lots of people don't know what's about the PhD. They say, what is this PhD? What silly you're doing 5 years? Just put it and come out. But
Yeah. No, I think you have. And also I'll tell you the job market a little bit. I know this is very touchy thing. There are plenty of jobs for women and for national labs. In most places, with PhDs. In fact, I know UGC came up, but this is going to happen, and it's going to increase the competition. But when you have a competition, they're going to look at other facts, and certainly all these things, what you are doing or what you have done, is going to make a decision, is a deciding factor. So I think don't give up. That's my suggestion to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Because one thing I want to share to everyone, sir. So actually, when I was at the school and college, everything was like I was like we can say as a first bencher. We say no. So I was good at studies, but at that time, but the time was like my father decided to get married very soon, sir. But so my dreams got vanish everything, because then I thought why I should just give up my dream. But at full, it was turmoil, sir, full night, because just taking a sun, then with the books like that it went on.
Right. So thank you, Ganga. I think we'll give a chance to others there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. How about somebody here?
From the physical mode?
Yeah.
Dr. Balki.
Some of the reviewer beside this type of literature, they are mentioning them. Whether it is mandatory to include
Okay.
that research article.
Right. No, this is excellent question. And typically when they ask you to cite, we have cut down quite a bit, mostly Chinese again. I've seen that. But let me say this. That's an excellent question. So the question was, you guys do all the hard work. You submit a journal paper, and your reviewer suggesting, sometimes the reviewer even doesn't say his name, he'll just put the title and stuff, and so you will say, now let me say this, in IEEE transactions, we have been catching, because a lot of times that's not, it's not a big no-no, because many of us realize this and complain. So if a reviewer has given 1 or 2 papers, diligently go through that paper. If the paper has any relevance to your work, then you cite one paper, the one that is relevant. And then in the response to reviewer comments, you nicely say that we thank the reviewer for his for the support. We cited the most relevant reference. Suppose you don't want to cite any relevant reference, you can simply say that after going through those references, the authors believe these papers were not relevant and were unable to cite. Yeah, and you won't have a problem. They won't penalize you. And we watched those, and those were all Chinese, because the NUS, I know there's a colleague of mine, he used to do that. He's from NUS. That's how some of the universities got big name, because most of the ranking is based on citations. And even India, now people are not cared about those citations. So I think people are catching up now. I know a colleague of mine used to be in US. He was cited twice as my citations, but that's because every paper he reviews, I don't review, but he reviews and he puts 4 or 5 papers. So I think now we're catching, and if we actually debar some of those reviewers. So in other words, if we find a reviewer is pushing those, we won't even be in the system. We basically block the reviewer. You see? All right. So anybody online?
The sharing.
Yeah. Anybody online want to ask me a question?
I have one more question.
Okay.
I already asked you a couple of it, but yeah. So I'm not a student anymore. I work in a corporate company, and I'm publishing just out of interest.
Emmanuel, can you tell me where your name, so people others know, and which company are you working?
Okay,
or where
so
you got your PhD?
No, I'm not a PhD student. I am an applied machine learning scientist with a company called Granger. I work in Chicago, Illinois, in US.
Oh, US, okay.
Yeah, so Sabita ma'am actually shared the link that your comments are at.
Okay, so you're working in Granger. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'm a machine learning scientist, and I just publish out of pure interest. I am not doing a PhD. Do you think it's good for corporate people to publish, or because we also it's difficult to work and publish and do research? I mean, is it going to help in any way?
Right. No, I think the same question that the other person asked. The bottom line is, remember, you cannot mix. This is what we tell people. You cannot mix your life problems with your work. So this is a standard thing, not now, anytime in your life. Because all of us, Emmanuel, let me say this to you and to others too. You know, even for me, for instance, right? Like I'm doing research, but I also have to teach courses. I have to write proposals, you know, and I have to mentor students. So what I mean is there are so many stuff happens to each of us, but research, if I'm a faculty member, research is just one of my portfolio. So what I mean is you cannot mix your life, you know, and with your work. So that's basically what I want to say to some of those people. So, you know, you have to dedicate some time for research, you see?
Okay.
Okay, so if you have done that, if you have not only now, even if a student, let's say a full-time student, let me tell you, we had also problems with students basically who are full-time. They don't have any issues like what you and others told. They are not working full-time, but they do something else, like they are browsing internet and they are not paying attention to research. So what we normally tell them is, you got to separate your personal life to your work. And this is going to happen not now, whether you do research or not, any sort of working relationship.
Yeah, like I brought this up because it's quite discouraging because research is not part of my work.
Right.
Like for faculty or PhD people, research helps them somehow. Like for me, there's no research in my work. I do applied machine learning, but I still do research out of interest, which is why I asked that.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah.
That's fine. And you know, if you have interest, you can. If you don't have interest, you don't have to. Research is not, like you said, it's a hard thing. Thank you for your question, though. So somebody here want to ask me? Yeah.
So when we do some kind of interdisciplinary research or applied research, how to identify the journal? Because many times when we send to a journal, they say it's not in their scope. For example, if I design a controller for automotive application, automotive related journal, they are not able to understand the control concept. The control related journal is not able to appreciate the kind of work that we are proposing for automotive. So how to identify the right journal communication.
Right.
And also one more thing is, like when we communicate the paper, some of the journal takes a very long time.
Right.
Is it advisable to follow up with the journal? Like sometimes we get a feeling that if you try to follow up too many times, they may get irritated or paper may not be accepted. So,
yeah, thank you. I think that's also another question. The question was that when you, how do you find a journal when you're doing interdisciplinary work? And the second part of the question was, if you don't get a response back from the journal within a stipulated time, do you send reminders? Okay, so let me take the second question first. It's a lot easier. So if you have not gotten a response back, the impact factor also depends on how quickly you get a response. Let me tell you. So in the computing the impact factor, the journals, they also look at how quickly we respond. So the whole series of assigning the papers to AEs in turn assigning to reviewers, all that essentially is considered, and that's how they use that information 4 months, 3 months. Then they calculate as part of the impact factor. So naturally, it's our best interest to turn back a paper between 4 to 4 months. In IEEE journals, we respond it within 4 to 5 months. Occasionally, a AE might be sleeping or he has some personal problem. Remember, that's the problem happens. So typically, I go and inject. I send him a reminder, or I send it to a different AE. And we have even fired AEs. I have done it. So somebody in some country, he wanted to be part of the associate editor, and he maybe not be spending time. In those instances, we have told him, you can be AE if you have not taken your job seriously. So this is exactly for the reason. So what I mean is, so for that reason now, are you allowed as an author to respond or to inquire about yes, you are allowed. Don't send an inquiry like 3 months or 4 months. You wait after 4 months. I would then send an inquiry. If you have not gotten an inquiry, wait another 2 months, because what happens is the editor is already contacted the associate editor and tell him that to accelerate. Okay, so sometimes if you send another email within 2 weeks, he may not have any answer. So typically he'll come back and tell you we are working on it. Okay, so that's basically what will happen to you. So I think my suggestion to you is you are allowed to send an email inquiry. Okay, now coming back to the issue of interdisciplinary journals. There are a lot of journals. Let me say this to you. Even the example that you gave, that the control application, there are still IEEE journals. I'll give you IEEE Transactions on Control System Technology. They take a lot of applications, not only just automotive, pretty much any application, bio, this, that. There's also in the IFAC, because you asked in the control, the IEEE is one society, the IFAC, International Federation of Automatic Control, that also has a control engineering practice journal. They also have a lot of applications they take. Okay, in IEEE, if you are power systems, there are industrial applications. Okay, there are a lot of journals which are targeting industrial applications. In those journals, sometimes they may want to see some hardware results. You see, so if you are trying to do more applied journal, either you have to have real data-based decision making or some hardware results. So if you do that, there's no issue. And typically they understand that, interdisciplinary. There are quite a few journals like that. So, but you need to realize that where is the contribution? Remember, I asked you the question, is the contribution in the applied side or in the theory side? Just like he told earlier that the deep learning and the large language models, there are a lot of journals in the large language models, but if the fundamental contribution is the learning, he can submit it to neural networks and learning systems. Yeah, they'll take it. We have papers, large language models and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any questions from online? I think we're getting time.
Yeah.
Any question from the online side?
Sir, good morning, sir.
Yeah.
Sir,
Can you say your name and where you are from?
Sir, my name is Satyababu, sir.
Yeah.
I'm a part-time scholar from Pondicherry University, sir. Puducherry Technological University.
Okay, Puducherry. Okay.
Yes, sir. My question is, there are some journals like paid journals and unpaid journals.
Right.
And hybrid journals also.
Yeah.
And nowadays I'm seeing some fast publishing journals also, sir.
Yeah.
Please give some idea about these things.
Yeah, excellent. No, this is a good question. I'm happy you asked this question. Right. So the question, for sake of others, I think this is an excellent question. The question was, definitely there are journals. In fact, even IEEE also has that option. You can publish it open access and you can have it closed access. I also have a debate. I'll never go to open access. Let me be blunt. Most of us never go to open access. Now, a lot of journals with open access, you have to pay. So as an author, you pay some money upfront, but there is a benefit they offer. What is the benefit? They'll make it your paper available to everybody. So the chances are that most people will access it free of cost so that people can read your paper. So certainly there will be increase in the citations. But what is happening in the process, that's a different business model. So what is happening, in fact, I had a conversation just last week. One of the journals in Switzerland wanted an editor-in-chief and they were talking to me if I can be, but this journal was open access. I don't like open access journals. Now, the main reason is that exactly what you just said. Most papers, the authors pay for it. So in academic community, if somebody is paying for a paper to publish, the quality of the paper is not good. So that's the basic, whether it's true or not. But if you publish in IEEE, you have an option. They'll ask you sometimes, Do you want open access or do you want closed access? You could prefer, if you want to go with an open access, you could do that. Because in some of those journals, they'll say that initially it should be the same, like reviewing all that. But once they're ready to publish it, you can choose. And if that is the case, you can pick whether open access or not. But the main drawback is that you have to have money. Some of those journals can charge, like I know in US, I don't know in India, but in US they charge anywhere between $2,000 to $2,500. Now remember, don't go. A lot of times, a lot of journals are coming to me, even from India. They'll say, "Hey, can you help editing this paper? We'll pay you." I will never do that, because that's not ethically correct. There's an ethical kind of situation. This has to come by merit. This cannot come by shortcuts. You cannot publish work purely based on just doing it. So shortcuts. So I think I would not encourage people to go through the shortcuts. And I don't know in India, because if you are a research scholar, imagine if they're charging you 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, where are you going to find the money? And even if you publish it, those journals may not be good. People may not cite you. So keep that in mind. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think so. We are running out of time.
Running out of time.
Yeah.
I think all our researchers will be very much interested to carry it on for a long time. Because of shortage of time due to professor's other commitments, we'll have to stop right here. And we would like to inform all the audience who are physically present and online that we have recorded the session, and we will give the link later. So there are a few questions raised regarding the availability of this sessions, Professor. So we are going to share with them.
Yeah, you can send an email. Yeah.
Yeah. So we will share it, and you can also post your questions through the email,
Right.
And so that we can actually.
You can respond.
Yes.
Maybe you collect and then send
Definitely,
it.
yes. So we will forward it to Professor, and we can get the responses from him and share with everyone. So thanks a lot, Professor. I would like to inform the audience that Professor Jagannathan Sarangapani is here as a Fulbright specialist, fully sponsored by US IEF. And this visit has been arranged completely by Professor Papa,
Right.
Professor from our Department of Instrumentation Engineering. So we would like to thank Professor Papa first, before
Right.
even thanking Professor Jagannathan.
Right.
So for arranging this wonderful opportunity, because we have been interacting with Professor on various modes, for various in various verticals, I should say, in terms of workshop and seminars and value-added courses and whatnot. Even all the research scholars had the wonderful time of having a one-to-one chat with Professor and clarifying their doubts. And Professor is ever yielding to all those queries, requests, everything. And he has been here with us like part of the instrumentation family and also part of the Anna University family for the past few weeks. And he'll be here for 2 more weeks. Few more weeks. And we request everyone who are all interested to send email. We will share the email also in the chat box now to our department email ID, so that we can arrange for some interactions with Professor. As long as he is here or even later on. So thank you so much, Professor, for your time and for your dedicated involvement with the subject topics as well as the growth of researchers in every domain. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone. We thank all the participants in the physical mode and the online mode for joining us and for also being very interactive and actively learning from this session. Professor Bhaskar sir is here.
Came all the way.
So,
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor Bhaskar, for coming physically here.
Support.
And our HOD, Professor Srinivasan sir, he is always supportive of all the activities in our department. Thank you so much. Thank you.